Steven, I think we've come to another Friday.
TGIF.
TGIF. And Tony from Electric Ventures, welcome. I think
Thank you.
The crew will tell us, is the mics working? Is the sound working? Do we sound good? Is the video working? Let's find out.
You guys tell us if everybody's able to hear everybody.
Clearly.
Yeah,
you had a bit of an echo.
Yeah. And I'm not upside down.
I think
I'm not upside down, so it's all
with
good.
you.
Snake Pliskins tell me no sound. I don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah, you cry wolf once, you're hard to trust this person, right? Has low sound, little echo.
Little echo, huh? It's always some echo. Not quite sure why.
You just want your mic to be heard by everybody, hogging the conversation, and then, no sound from the middle guy.
I have no sound?
Middle guy. Hey, you can't
Tony's the middle guy.
I'm the middle guy.
The middleman. Nobody likes the middleman. Too much money.
Oh, I have low sound. I see why. Okay, that should fix me. That should fix me. Now I'm probably blasting their ears off.
So Tony is tomorrow into the future. So he's
this is Saturday morning for me, folks. Yeah.
So what time is it over there right now? Not 8 o'clock. That's for sure.
It is 11 a.m. I've already been up. I've had my breakfast. I've had my second cup of coffee.
So I have to say really quick, we're at episode, what is this, 77, 78? Still have not gotten off to a good start. Still have audio problems. Out of 77 episodes, I'm still not doing it. So hopefully it's good now. Let's hope.
Just stop messing around with the damn buttons.
You know what I was told? You know what I was told? Make it gay, put a chick in it, and make it suck. I was just trying to do that. I was just trying to make all three of those things happen.
You're trying to listen to your idol, Kathleen Kennedy.
Oh, them fighting words.
More chicks, more gay. Okay,
fighting words.
So, who in the chat has watched the new South Park episode? I know Tony hasn't. We're trying not to spoil it too much, but who in the chat has actually watched the South Park special episode? They call it. It's not a regular episode.
The Pandaverse. And in the meantime, while we're doing that, let's go through the chat, see who we got here. Steve, you want to read them out?
Yeah, let's see who we got here, because there's a ton of people in here. Carlo, Goofyfoot, Thor KC, Jason, Dan Z, Pliskin's Run. Who else we got? A guy named Glenn's Retro Show. I don't know who that is. Some guy.
No, watch that scumbag.
Hawk Hurts. His Hawk Hurts. I don't know. Anyways, Sir Sega, Will, Sean. That's my cousin from down south. Who else we got here? Andy's Game Room. Adam Caleb. Let's see who else we got here. There's a lot of repetitive names here. Hobby Hands. Epkus. Who else we got? Think without repeating too many people. Greg, Walzel, and Fenrir Fire, Overt Enemy, JLS Gaming, and Overt Enemy. And then there's more people coming, so we're sitting about 30 people in the chat. So welcome to our humble little corner of the internet.
Yes, and tonight we're going to be talking NES. Because
NES programming, to be more specific.
Tony's got a book.
Now,
Steven,
I don't know anything about this stuff. Well,
that's why I told you to talk about it. I don't know anything about the stuff. Steven, take it away.
I'm like, I don't know how to program the NES. The only experience I have is I played around a little bit with NES Maker, which is a tool that we'll have to maybe get that guy on too later on. But in the end, Tony has been working on NES games basically since I've known him, and I think did the Caverns of whatever Cindy Hunter game, did it actually get released yet, or is it out?
It's still in, shall we say, beta. It's still in beta.
Okay, that's been going on since we've known each other. So
a while, yes.
But in the meantime, he's supplementing the time with writing a book to how to program. So you figure after so many years, tell us about the book. Give us a big rundown of what the book will be all about.
Well, there's a lot of information about programming the NES on the internet, and there's some quite good information. But one of the things that's missing, and also there are some starting guides, but the starting guides usually miss some important steps. And some people won't know the assembly language at all, so they'll balk at that part. So there's a section of the book that just teaches enough assembly language so you can learn the techniques, and then there's how do you actually put a game together? What makes up the different elements of a game? Because you need to write a lot of specific elements of a game to get it working. So the book takes you through all of those steps, has examples, has code. So you end up with a very simple game at the end of the book, but hopefully enough knowledge to then go and make
another game or whatever.
Yes. And you go through all the tools, and obviously you do it on modern systems, either Windows, Mac, or Linux.
Yeah, that'd be the smart thing to do, so that you don't use a slow-ass computer to make an NES game. You'll be at it for a long time. Now, you've written a previous book. We talked about it before many times. Is a ColecoVision. Well,
yes.
Does it just cover the ColecoVision, that one, or does it do MSX at the same time? Or
no, that one's Coleco and Atom.
Okay.
So it does actually cover it because the Atom has more facilities than the actual Coleco itself. So
gotcha.
The Atom.
But that came out a couple of years ago, I think, eh? Something like that.
It is, yes. And the physical print, when we did it as a physical print, is sold out. You can get a couple of copies still if you order directly off me signed. And you can still buy that one on Amazon as an electronic book. But I'm going to release a new edition that you'll be able to do Amazon print on demand as like a second.
Oh, that's good. Well, that's
wasn't expecting it to sell out.
I thought you probably had a few extra copies left, but since it's all gone, and that's it. So so the Coleco book is coming back in a second life, we'll call it, and then this new book, which is not out yet, will take you through a game from A to not a full blown Mario kind of game, but a simple get you started kind of game.
Yeah, go over shoot 'em up, because shoot 'em ups have a lot of the basic mechanics. Oh, don't worry, we're going to make Glenn program some code later. No, only joking.
Just have me work on sound channels on the NES. I'll be great at it.
Yeah, but I mean, a couple of
Glenn
things
and Nosebleed, throw some code.
Yeah, it covers things like creating sound effects and music and everything like that, using the modern tools that you have available.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
I
book-
actually have a question,
the-
Tony,
the-
because Steve was
Yeah.
telling me you also did a book about the ColecoVision programming. Obviously, ColecoVision is a slightly older machine. How does it compare to the NES as far as ease of programming between the two? Is the NES any easier than the ColecoVision or no?
Now, the NES in some respects is a little harder because the NES as a console has nothing. There's no system BIOS or system routine. So everything that you make it do, you have to make it do. So
There's no BIOS in the NES?
Nothing.
Oh, wow. Okay. I did not know
So
that.
it's bare metal. The NES is bare metal programming, right to
NES
the
is bare metal. But it's one of the reasons why it was such a good console, and the fact that they made it fully expandable through the cartridge port. So that's why the games get better and better as the NES, travels through time, because they can continually figure out new ways to add new features to it. And as you know, the Mega Man series is a really good example. The first Mega Man game is just using a fairly basic cartridge, just with maybe extra storage space than was compared to some of the original games. But as you go through the Mega Man games, they're called memory mappers, better and better memory mappers that actually added extra features to the NES, allow it to show a bit more color and have a bit more control. A split screen Skool, as an example. So that's not something it can do natively out of the box.
Now, Pliskin's Run wants to know, you still got to blow in the cartridges to make it work?
Oh, you'd lose the joy of the experience if you didn't have to do
that. Everybody associates the NES with blowing in that cartridge, which is like going to be the worst thing you could do. But
actually, it is.
By the way,
you're blowing moisture onto the connection, so it's actually not a good thing to blow on, to be quite honest.
It's actually making the cartridges worse. Yes,
correct.
Yeah,
a little rubbing alcohol.
Hey, do you know what I do to get around that pain? I actually have a AV Famicom, the top loader from Japan, and I have a little cartridge adapter, and I put my NES cartridges in that because then it's far less mucking around.
Well, yeah, with the front loading NES, you just hit the corner of the console, and it reset my game. Wow!
I have the original. We used to have Gyromite up there. I live in New York, so I had gotten the launch edition of the NES. It's it was only launched in New York initially. It was a test market, and it was at a TSW store. It was probably 2 days in New York, and I got Gyromite. It came with Gyromite and Duck Hunt, and I love the music in Gyromite, but I have not had one single problem with my NES. Not one problem with the cartridge. Not a problem with it glitching. I've never once had a problem with my NES. I know a lot of people gone through cartridge connectors and they get the little blinking red light.
Was done with TLC.
I guess.
After that, it was just slapped together. That's usually the way it goes.
And yes, Hobby Hands, it is still in the box and in a bag.
In a plastic bag, wrapped up.
It is.
And if you want to know another secret, when I first saw the NES here in Australia, I didn't like it because most of the games were written for the North American market, and they just roughly converted them over, and they run at 50 hertz instead of 60 hertz. And guess what they play like?
They're nice and slow.
Yeah, and the music sounds terrible.
Oh, that sucks. Well, that's the thing. Now you have programmed. I helped you out with the cartridge label on this one. Was Meteor Storm?
Yes.
And
Meteor
was
Storm
that your
for
first
the
one?
NES?
Was that
no? My first one was actually John Lester from GameStar 81 started the Game On Expo in Arizona.
Yep.
And for the very first one, and I was working with. He's part of ColecoVision as well, associated with ColecoVision. So, and they own Sydney Hunter. And I've been programming Coleco games with them, and they asked, "Oh, Tony, you're a programmer. You can program the NES and make us a championship cartridge." And I went, right, okay, never programmed on the NES before.
Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen. So I had 3 months. Right?
3 months.
3 months, that's pretty good for not having any knowledge beforehand.
Yeah, and I will say, I've only briefly used 6502 assembler before. I've mainly been a Z80 person throughout most of my programming career.
Well, I have to tell you something, Tony. if I was ever stuck in a cave with you and there's guns pointed at us, and the guy said, "Program a game and you can go home," I
Make
would
an
sure
Iron
be
Man suit.
stuck with you.
Make an Iron
Okay,
Man
Tony,
suit.
you can get us out of this one, right? You did one in 3 months. Go.
Now,
Yeah, so I basically wrote 3 games in 3 months on a cartridge with a timer so they could run the competition. So the first game was the original incarnation of Sydney Hunter, where it's just running through a set of screens and you've got to collect the diamonds. It's not Caverns of Death. It's the name escapes me, but Caverns of Doom or something like that. And so that's the first game. The middle game, they really wanted a racing car game, so I had to learn split screen scrolling, and the NES is actually very slow, and the video controller is completely separate. So you've got to get data to the video controller. So when you're doing the direction changes on the tracks, I have to start drawing the next curve in the road 7 frames before it's going to appear. So I had to write a look ahead thing of the track coming down, so I could start drawing the next section of the track, so I could flip screens and show the curve.
I think.
And the third game,
bleeding right about now.
and the third game, I just got my Z80 source code from my Meteor Swarm game, because it's actually asteroids, and I converted that, and that became the start of the then extended Meteor Swarm that I released independently for the NES later. So I added a lot more features to the one that I released as a separate cartridge.
Gotcha.
We got a quick question from Pliskin's Run. What's your favorite SNES game? Not one you programmed yourself, because obviously
Not
you love
SNES,
those.
NES.
Sorry,
NES game.
Sorry, NES game.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned Mega Man a couple of times. I actually really do like the Mega Man series. But one of my favorite games is actually Kirby. The original Kirby game. Yeah.
Named after the Nintendo lawyer.
Yeah. One of my other YouTube friends, Mark Vergier over in the Netherlands, sent me that cartridge, and I'd never played it before. And I just really enjoyed it. It was a nice laid back game. And I suppose related to that, the New Zealand story on the NES is actually really good as well. I like those sort of. I mean, I'm known to being a bit of a shoot 'em up fanatic, but I like those sort of platformer games as well.
What about you, Glenn? What's your favorite NES game?
Well, I have Gyromite on the screen. That was the first NES game I played. I really enjoyed it. But if I'm being honest,
but is it your favorite?
No. My cousin, I remember like New Year's Eve, we used to all back in the day, we'd all go to your cousin's house or your parents' house or wherever for New Year's, and it was Ghosts and Goblins. So Ghosts and Goblins and Castlevania, 2 games I absolutely love on the NES. I actually never sacrilege. I never owned Super Mario Brothers cartridge because mine came with Duck Hunt and Gyromite. I only got Super Mario Brothers.
It wasn't the dual one that had
it was two separate. Nope, it was 2 separate cartridges.
Gotcha.
Nope, Super Mario didn't exist yet. I never had it until maybe a couple of years ago, actually on cartridge form, when I just picked up a lot and we just happened to be in there. But I know people love Super Mario and it's their favorite game, and it's a great game. Don't get me wrong, it's a great game. But I didn't have that experience with it. I even won. The first thing I ever won in my life was you would send in your warranty card to Nintendo, and you entered in a contest. You could win a game, and I picked Rad Racer because I didn't know. And then I got Rad Racer, and I go 3D. It sucked. It was a horrible game. It was a horrible game. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I didn't have an NES. I didn't grow up with one, so I didn't really have a favorite. So I didn't really. I was one of these computer master race, Commodore 64 master race people that basically looked down upon the NES folks and went, well, I have better games on my, my Commodore 64. And the two were pretty close in graphics, but the sound was way better on the 64 and stuff like that. So I was one of those guys.
Well, I'm gonna ask Tony another question here.
My house with a small NES there.
Since Tony knows ColecoVision, obviously, Steven, you're a big ColecoVision guy, and the NES. Now, people say that the ColecoVision, if the game crash did not happen, would have been still very good competition for the NES. What's your thoughts on that, knowing the architectures as you do?
He's the perfect guy to ask that question.
I thought so.
Yeah. Well, out of the box of what the Coleco can do versus the NES. Now, the NES has a larger color palette, but it's incapable of displaying a large amount of those colors on the screen at any one time. So it is very limited. Whereas the Coleco has 16 bright colors. It has the Z80A processor, which runs a lot faster, and it is a little crippled by normal memory. They have about the same video RAM. And they both have hardware sprites. Right? So it requires a lot more effort on the Coleco to scroll, but you still can scroll. It's just through clever use of programming. The programmers didn't really get a lot of time to push the Coleco back in the day.
The Zaxxon's a great example of how they had to software scroll. You could tell as it was going, it had to redraw all that.
And you can see by more and more homebrew titles that have been coming out lately that it is possible to, fine scroll and do lots of things and play lots of music on the Coleco. And with the addition of a little bit more RAM, which is all the Super Game module gives you, plus a slightly different sound chip, that really opens up what the console can do. Because of the speed of the processor and the power of the graphics processor. This is another thing that people don't realize is the graphics processor that the Coleco has, which was invented for the TI-99 by Texas.
This guy knew that. This guy knew that.
Was used in a lot of machines, and that whole idea of having a separate graphics processor and a main CPU goes back to what arcades used to do. They have to have different chips to do different things. The NES's graphics chip is actually a descendant of that TI chip. So
did not know that.
Okay, we're still going to keep 16K of video RAM, but we're going to use it in a different way, and we're going to add, some hardware scroll registers and change how the memory is used for sprites and things like that. But it is a descendant because, of course, Nintendo, when they made the NES, they borrowed technology from a couple of places. So they borrowed that, and they borrowed the 6502. They didn't.
So like the IBM PC used off-the-shelf parts, Nintendo did the same thing. They're looking for off-the-shelf parts for their machine.
Yeah, but they modified them and put them in their custom chips, which Rico made for them, and they are clones, and they've basically used other IP without paying for it. So the 6502, they removed one component out of it to make it not exactly the same, and obviously they've modified the graphics chip because it was well published, the design of the chip. The Sega Master System, Sega was exactly the same thing. They did the same thing. They took the original TI chip and they modified it slightly because they brought out the SG-1000 console with that chip.
Right.
And then they had the Sega Master System. They made a descendant of that chip that went on. So it was like a big family tree. And then you've got MSX2, chose a different path as well.
But there are a lot of similarities with all those.
So ultimately, between, do you think that the ColecoVision could have held its own with the NES? If the crash didn't happen, would the ColecoVision potentially held off the NES juggernaut that came in the United States?
All you have to look at is the quality of the games that came out for the MSX by companies like Konami and Capcom and everything like that. If those companies had have been allowed free rein on the Coleco, if it had kept going, it would have been a powerhouse of a system. And you would have got the memory expander earlier on. There always was supposed to be a super module, super game module. And it would have had that extra life. It was just cut short by market circumstances, and it was actually the Atom that killed the Coleco, not the Coleco.
Correct. No, the Coleco was doing very well. Cabbage Patch Kids were doing really well. What killed the Atom was they tried to be too rambunctious with. It was a great idea. Bundling everything together in one package was a fantastic idea. The original price of $500 was mind-blowing. Of course, they didn't hit that price
for
point.
What you got. Yes.
Yeah, they didn't hit the price point. They went well above it, and they didn't use the wafer tapes. They ended up using, again, people think that the Atom had cassette drives. It really was not a cassette drive. They looked like cassettes, but they were not a cassette drive. They actually had sectors on the tapes. They seeked as a high-speed, like a floppy disk, but left to right versus diagonal. And the initial ones were just out too early. They didn't bake it long enough. They didn't really have time to really troubleshoot it, number one. The other problem was that they could have taken the Atom, sent them to the Soviet Union, had them turn them on, and the EMPs would have took down the whole Soviet Union in the 80s, and there would be no problem with the Soviet Union today, because the printer created such an EMP pulse that if you had any magnetic media near that Atom console, when you turn that sucker on, it wiped the tape. And on the console, when they first shipped, it says to load the game, make sure the game's in before you turn it on. So they would put the game in, turn it on, and bam, wipe the tape.
And nobody listened to that.
Well,
that sticker.
But the thing is, they thought the machine.
The sticker.
But then they think the machine's defective. They can't load BASIC. They can't load Buck Rogers. They put the tape in.
They take it back. Yeah.
Right. They take it back. So it's like a 90% return rate. People hear that, and they stop. The Atom computer itself, and then the expansion module. If you had a ColecoVision, bought the expansion module. The Atom computer was actually a really nice computer. The BASIC for the Atom was Apple BASIC, like 95% compatible. So you had a lot of games you could use. It's just a couple of little missteps, but it cost them dearly. And then Nintendo, as we all know, resurrected the U.S. market. Now, when that happened, did that affect you down in Tasmania? Was there a crash similar to what we had here in the States in the 80s, or you guys never even saw it?
So what happened was there was a place called I'm going to say Futurama, Futuretronics, right? So they're actually quite big in Australia, and so some collectors talk about the Hess titles. They're the Hess, the plastic case titles,
right?
So they bought the rights to reproduce Activision games, Magic games, Atari games, and a number of Coleco games, and re-release them under the Hess license. So they bought old cartridge stock and printed. They just put them in the plastic cases and printed their own labels and everything like that. And then later on, obviously, they still sold those. So the market went on for a period of time. And down here in Australia, the NES was just a whimper. You didn't see it on the market hardly at all. It was the Sega Master System that really hit big. And that's why you actually have, a couple of titles that were only released in Australia and Germany for some reason for the Sega Master System. So that's what you saw. And the MSX came out. So the computers kept going. A lot of them disappeared. And, even the Commodore 64 completely, utterly bombed the first time it came out because they had quality problems as well.
Now, what were the issues they were having on the 64 originally? Because I had never heard that about the 64. What was going on with the 64?
Well, there was actually like 6 different hardware versions of the 64, and the original ones, it was just, the boards would fail.
Yeah. I thought there were 6 versions because they were cost reducing every 5 seconds to get it down in price. But you're saying there were issues with the design?
Yeah, not as bad as their Amiga era, but the original Commodore 64, and it was expensive to start with. It was like $600 when it released.
Yeah, it was $599 here in the States when it first came out.
And the price would die on the Commodore 64 a lot too. I mean, as a kid, I think we replaced our power supply like 6 of them.
I will say that Commodore is not known for the power supplies. Those power bricks were not the best.
But when they
crack them open, a bunch of glue in there and stuff. It's forget it.
Yeah, when they lowered their price, that's when they were perfect timing, and they basically took over the market. Then that's when Commodore 64 really took over.
Now I'm going to take
That's my system of choice.
64. I still don't have one. One day.
I've
been looking.
Really?
I've been looking for the VIC-20 64. I've been looking, but I don't have one yet. But next thing I want to ask you is, what got you into programming itself? I mean, I programmed BASIC. I made a Donkey Kong game. It actually worked. I was impressed, but I never got past BASIC. So what really got you into programming? Not only that, I guess we can see all these nice machines behind you that you have there. You're obviously a collector as well. Tell us a little bit about your backstory as far as that goes.
Well, we need to wind back a little bit, and we're going to talk Texas Instruments, which will make Glenn.
Hey, I'm fine talking TI, man. I'm with you.
So I went to when I was in high school, I did advanced science, and I was going to do you had to do a special project, and mine was going to be on rocketry and everything, like a sort of space nut. And one of my friends suggested to the teacher, if we asked the teacher if we could go play on the computer, the school's computer. The school's computer was a dumb terminal into the education mainframe. I went and started playing with it, and I got hooked. So I was playing Advent 80, which is one of the very first text adventures. And there's another one called Dungeon, which is like a role-playing game. And I was really heavily into role-playing games and everything like that. I dug in there. I found some information on programming on mainframe BASIC. So as my project, I wrote a book on programming BASIC. That's what I handed in.
How old were you when you did that?
That was 15.
You wrote a book on programming at 15.
Yeah.
You make us look like a bunch of chumps.
Impressive.
And
That's
and
awesome.
I local tandy stores, hanging out in local tandy stores and
I
playing
miss
on
tandy
the
stores.
TRS-80 Model 1 and Model 2s. And so I have a fondness for those and the TRS-80 color and everything like that. And then I basically sold my train set, my Lego, my Fisher Technics, all my toys, and had enough money. I had about $350. And I was trying to find a computer somewhere, and I found a second-hand TI-99/4, not the 4A.
Oh, the original,
talking,
with the TMS
yes,
990 chip. Very nice.
Yeah, yes, the chiclet keyboard, and the guy was supposed to give me his, because he was upgrading to a 4A. Right, and when I went around to this guy's house, he had the whole side train thing.
That must have been
he had
long.
a long desk.
That had to be long,
right? And he was supposed to give me the advanced basic cartridge with it, and he never did. And he took off and never heard from him again. So I got
basic.
My father
limited.
chipped in. Yeah, this thing cost me $650 second hand. I got TI Invaders and Munch Mania, and the basic that was built into it, and a cassette tape, a recorder. That's it. And so I obviously played those two games to death, and then well, I need to make it do something. So I think we spent an entire weekend making a Saturn V rocket take off and go over the screen and then get smaller, and as it stages things, and then something land on the moon. And we had to type part of it in twice because it was a hot summer day and the machine overheated, and we hadn't saved it.
Now, the good old days.
Well, there's a saying with the TI. If you look at the side, there's like a black area for your cartridge slot. That was called your coffee warmer, because you could put your coffee in that spot and it would keep your coffee hot.
Keep it warm. Yes.
You have to say coffee with that Jersey accent.
Coffee.
That coffee.
Well, I'm New York. I can't say New Jersey. I'm sorry. Coffee.
And of course, funnily enough, I outgrew that machine quite quickly. So in under a year. So then I was shopping around, and my options available at the time was the VIC-20, because I really liked Radar Rat Race. But I was concerned about the basic built into it was extremely primitive. It was exactly the same as the one for the PET. They hadn't changed it at all. It only had 4K of RAM. I could get an extra 4K RAM card for the price. So we're talking around $300.
But we're talking $300 back then, which is a lot more than $300 is today. So we're talking there's a lot.
And remember, I paid $650 for the original machine. I've sold it and I've got $300. That's all the money I have. So I can't spend any more. I actually looked at a Sega SG-1000. Oh, sorry, SC-3000, which is the very first model. So it's an SG-1000 with a rubber keyboard. And that had Starjacker and Congo Ball. That's some really cool games. But the original SpectraVideo was being launched. And that was at one of my game store, and I'd been hanging out in there and helping out at Christmas, selling Atari 2600 and television, and they also had Atari 400s and 800s there, which I loved. I could never afford.
I love the 400. I mean, I know people hate the 400. Yes. I love the 400. But that SpectraVideo,
it's just got that particular.
Was that SpectraVideo the one with the joystick built into the keyboard?
Yes, the red joystick on the right-hand side, and it had rubber keys again.
Nice.
But I went through all these things, and it had the best basic.
It had the best basic.
It had the best basic because it's actually written by Microsoft. It is the same basic as the TRS-80 Color, which is quite an enhanced version of Microsoft Basic, but it's actually the next version. And it was developed by 2 programmers from SpectraVideo and 2 programmers from Microsoft.
Interesting. Yeah, the TI.
And if you want to go side story
here, even the extended basic on the TI was not good. It was not a good basic, and it was slow.
No.
The 64 was much better.
And
Well-
the basic on the SpectraVideo ran quite quickly, and you didn't need to use machine code to start with to make basic games. So I started, and the SpectraVideo came out, and it had barely any games, right? But I loved the machine, and I just started programming and making my own. So I made about 80 software titles for the original SpectraVideo.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't
By
there
the time the MSX came along?
wasn't there an expansion module for the SpectraVideo for like Coleco cartridges? Didn't they make expansion?
Yes, that's actually how I had my first. I never had an actual Coleco console. I had my SpectraVideo computer. I managed to talk the manager of the store that I worked at of letting me have one of the Coleco adapters and a joystick from a broken Coleco.
See, that's the thing. I remember this, and of course, Jason, our residential AI we have here in the chat, it's a SpectraVideo SV 318, and I remember seeing that. I remember seeing the joystick built into the keyboard. I remember, my God, because Coleco kind of started that. Coleco was the first with the expansion module, letting you run someone else's game, the 2600 games. And they were going to make an Intellivision module, and then of course Intellivision made an Atari module as well. They were trying to make another module. But I did see the SpectraVideo had that, but you're the first person to tell me that you had the machine, never owned a ColecoVision, but you had that module to play those games. You're the first person I ever heard say that.
Yeah, and that's actually how I played the Coleco at home. Obviously, I could play the Coleco at the store, and that Christmas when the Coleco came out was amazing. We'd get, at the start of the day, we'd get 30, 40 box Colecos in the morning. I'd stack them around and put them all everything, and they'd be gone by mid-afternoon.
Very popular, I guess, back then.
Just flew off the shelves. But my SpectraVideo, that was very popular down in Tasmania and some other parts of Australia as well, because it had also had support by digital research. So it had this super expander. It had the whole works. The
CPM.
whole
You could run
ecosystem.
CPM.
You could run CPM on it. Yes, right.
Now, for people who don't know, people who grew up with MS-DOS, Microsoft kind of stole Digital Research's CPM language. Well, they didn't technically. Someone else kind of stole it, and they bought it for $50,000. But here or there,
yes. Hands distance, of course.
Right.
Yes.
And the big thing with CPM was you can write the program kind of for just CPM, and you could run it on a multitude of different machines, which was very forward-thinking at the time. You had just write code for the one operating system, and you could run it on this machine, that machine, or that machine. It didn't matter as long as it ran CPM. And Gary Kindle, unfortunately, died a pretty sad death end of his life. But
yeah,
he's a
plane
genius.
accident. Yeah.
So there was 128 have CPM also.
It did.
Yes, it did. Yeah, they added a Z80 and a separate set of memory, so like a computer with an.
The whole thing fell apart. Obviously, what happened there, but
the TI, was like, a lot of those old machines, TI, Apple,
was kind of popular at the time, I guess.
Even
it was just a whole.
Even IBM did offer CPM because Digital Research was suing them
as an alternative.
Right. What Microsoft did. The problem was Microsoft was selling their MS-DOS for like $40, and CPM was like $320 or $360.
Yes, because then.
But basically the same thing, even though Digital Research was the innovator and creator of it, Microsoft just went in and went for the throat and got it.
Yeah, and Digital Research is basically a mum and pop type level business, yes, versus, and Bill Gates' main claim to fame is that he had most of a legal degree.
He knew what he was doing. He knew how to screw people.
Legally.
But
and legally.
Yeah, so the CPM was very big in Australia, and a lot of the original CPM gurus and supporters and everything like that. There was a big bunch of them down in Australia, and some of them hidden down in Tasmania. And that's what started. There was a SpectraVideo user group, which turned into a SpectraVideo and MSX users group, and SpectraVideo and MSX Australasian, to include New Zealand, users group. And they did, it was very primitive magazine and everything like that. But I started to publish articles for that as well, type in games and odd things. And later on, I actually took over one of the MSX magazines to keep it going, to keep on selling my titles. Yeah, so I went from SpectraVideo to MSX as far as programming is concerned, because I could just convert all my titles over. and I wrote a book called MSX and SpectraVideo Complete User's Guide as well.
How many?
So I published that in 1991.
Books have you written?
Well, if you count the one that I did for my school project, I suppose 4 books and 2 magazines I've published and edited. And software titles, it's probably well over 100 for different systems by the time you add them all up.
Really?
Damn.
I mean, most of them are for the original SpectraVideo.
I don't think I've read more than 2 books, and you've written like 100 books. I have to admit, we got to talk a little bit about your current book here, because I started going through it, and it's an easy read. It's not like you can't like comprehend the stuff. You kind of make things in very simple terms as you go through the programming in the NES.
Yeah, well, this is the good thing. I mean, I had this particular concept about teaching people because I suppose I like write. I've always obviously going to things like writing, if you know what I mean, and not just writing words, writing games, but I've also liked teaching other people how to do things. So I suppose I've always been fairly good at being able to explain things to people, but also what I've found really good with the Manning process, because this is the first time I've worked with a proper publisher, is they go through all these formal reviews. So you actually get to see how other people interpret the book as you're putting it together.
That's the way.
So we've gone through, and people have done feedback, and I've gone, all right, so they've done that particular comment, but why have they done that comment? And then I've gone, right, I'm not explaining it the right way for that person to understand it. So we've already gone through, for a fair percentage of the book, that process. And so the book is launched now in what's called MEAP, which is Manning Early Access Program. And the whole idea is you can buy the book now. You can either just buy an electronic version, or you can buy what's called a combo. Combo means you'll get the physical book when it comes out later. So rather than before, people rush through, do a book and release it to physical print, and then people read it and comment on it and go, oh, he's made a mistake here, he hasn't covered this, and all this sort of things. As part of the early access program, you can actually comment on the book, and we can make changes before it goes to print. And the changes are obviously published back to the early. I've already made some changes back in chapter 2, because I've been posting on some of the forums and asking some questions. And it is now content complete. I've finished all the chapters and all of the appendixes, but some of them obviously need to go through a couple more review cycles. But we have released 9 chapters to MEAP now, and there'll be chapters 10 and 11 will probably drop next Thursday, I reckon.
Yeah, that's the main thing about your comment. This is a proper publisher, meaning,
yes.
See, the thing is I find a lot of things nowadays, they don't go through, I won't say a proper set of procedures and stuff, but people crank out games and they don't do beta testing or whatever, and then put it out there, and then it's littered with bugs, and then they wonder why. Then you're like, well, that's not the proper way. Sorry.
And somebody just posted in the comments, programming the NES for dummies. That's exactly what it is. It's in that style of books, right? It is actually, that's it. Hobby hands. That's it.
And that's the thing. Like, anybody could do this, but to do it properly is a different ball game.
Correct.
And doing it like with a right publisher and a right publisher, not only from a book standpoint, from a game standpoint too. I mean, let's face it, homebrew in general, some places do it right, some places don't. You know what I mean? It's you release a game that's full of bugs, then you're like, well, that publisher doesn't really sift through their bugs. And then you get the other one where they do. So sure, you can get to A to Z, but doing it A to Z properly, that's a whole different ball of wax. Because nowadays, with people with 3D printers,
rapid prototyping, yes.
You could crank stuff out like in a week, but is it done properly? Probably not. Like Glenn going through that with his products, it takes a few months to put out a product. It's not just there in a week.
Months.
Oh yeah, we create.
Takes more than months.
Well, many months, accumulate that into years, but that's the key there, right? And then I just find nowadays people can crank out stuff in a week, and it looks great, but it's crap. Or whatever.
But a lot of people can get to the 90%. You can get to the 90% quickly, but getting that last mile, it's why and look, I've got a real job. I work in I've done various programming jobs. I think I work in data at the moment, so massaging large data and manufacturing forecasts and things like that, which is completely boring to this topic. But it does take up a lot of time. I've got a family. I've got 4 kids. I was saying before the show, my wife unfortunately broke her toe a couple of weeks ago, so that's why my video output has dropped completely, because I've been taxing everywhere.
You've been helping her out. That's the way to do it.
Yes. My youngest child is you've got to get 80 hours of driving to get your provisional license,
right,
where you can drive by yourself.
Right.
As of yesterday, we have her at 77.8 hours.
Damn.
So, that's been a lot of work. And I've been working on this book, and I have prioritized that over doing the last couple of things on Sydney Hunter and the Caverns of Death as well. But I'm also fussy that game won't be released until I think it's rock solid.
That's a good idea. You don't want to release something and then everybody bugs you that it's broken or
right. Don't go with the arcade one-up mentality of just send it out there and maybe people won't notice.
And you have the original game was a Super Nintendo game, right? So there is some compromise when you're trying to put a Super NES game into an NES.
Well, that's the thing. So it's no, it's good. Appreciate the insight. So do we talk about more retro pop stuff here, or do we want to keep doing the book? Or
well, let's talk a little more about the book. I mean, how long are we actually working on this book? I mean, obviously, you've been coding in for a while. You made a game for Gamester 81, who's a friend of mine. He's a really great guy. How long did it take you to actually? Because it's one thing to know how to do something. It's one thing to know how to program. One thing to know how to fix a car. It's another thing to take that knowledge
and re-educate a bunch of people
and put it in a book in a way that people can understand.
Well, it's sort of it springs off the Coleco one. So I think I've worked my general system of how I teach game programming came from the Coleco one, but now this NES one is much better refined because of the review process. But it's taken a year. We've been going a year now since actually Manning contacted me, and that's how we started the conversation. And I think they'd seen the Coleco book was the catalyst. And it's not just the book you've got to write. You've got to write the code, right? So that's all available in a GitHub repository, so you can download all of that. The very last code for the last chapter I haven't submitted to the repository yet, but it'll be there shortly. So it can all be revised and it's all open. I've tested all of that quite thoroughly. I also I've developed an NES tile editor like my MSX and Coleco tile editor while I was developing my NES games, and I've released that for free as part of the book as well. I've bought a very expensive code signing certificate, so Windows won't complain about the program. So yes, the both it and my MSX one will be signed by that shortly. I just got that the other day. You've got to use a hardware key now, apparently, be signed enough so Microsoft's Defender won't do the horrible pop-up message. Do you trust this program? So there's a lot of
you and I struggled with that when I was helping you test the MSX Coleco one, and it would come up and say certificates expired or not valid, or Defender would start blocking everything that it was doing. So I'm glad
I only got that key 3 days ago, so I need to release a new version of both programs before the 11th.
That's cool. That's cool. Which
I will do. But the actual the writing part, I started with the shell of the Coleco book for this book, and then I have enhanced that. So it's a little bit different. Like the Coleco one has a BIOS guide. There is no BIOS on the NES. So
now with the BIOS on the ColecoVision, I mean, it's basic input output. I mean, is that really what the ColecoVision BIOS was doing? Or was it more of like a lockout chip? I mean, did you have to go through the BIOS?
No. The BIOS is a whole heap of useful routines to help you program games, so you didn't have to include that in your game cartridge.
So what would be a useful one in the ColecoVision? What was something in the BIOS that would help you code?
Well, one of the main thing was to set up the various screen modes. There are some drawing routines for drawing blocks. There are some sprite displaying routines. There's things for reading. There's a routine to read the controller. There's a really good section of timer code for timing things. And also in the BIOS, there is a little flag that says 50 or 60 hertz.
So it can set up for PAL or NTSC. But
so you can program the game once, and you can look at that thing in your code, and it'll work in both regions fine, and
that's a good thing. But I would assume any graphic or sound routines that are in the BIOS would be more primitive than bare metal going to it and really pounding the hardware.
Oh God, yes. And it's the same things like early Coleco games used the font that was built into the BIOS. So that's why they have that fairly ugly font.
Yeah.
It is ugly. There's no sugar wrap in that. Yeah.
Oh, it's a nasty font. And you're like, geez.
But you know what? Huh? It's a nasty font, but the zeros had lines through it. And nothing pisses me off more in this day and age when you look at an O and a zero and you can't tell what's what. Mm-hmm. I want my line through the zero, and they took that away.
And so the games that I've developed for the ColecoVision, I always target original hardware. So there is a lot you can do with the original hardware if you use other features a little differently. So all of my graphics are compressed. So I can, using pure assembly on the Coleco, I can make a much complicated game. I haven't run out of cartridge space yet in the standard 32K cartridge.
32K, okay.
Yeah. So when the Coleco first came out, ROMs were expensive. So like Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. only had 8K ROM. That's why they're missing a screen. And they didn't compress anything.
So to build up on that, so Tony did Berserk for the ColecoVision and used some of those. And then I was doing the graphics on it, and Tony came up to me and he says, "Hey, can you do the character set? You mean the font?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I had to, ABC up to Z, and then lowercase, and then 0 to 9 kind of thing. And I was like, "Wow, okay." So it gives you a sort of a perspective on what needs to be thrown in there, but pulled it off. I mean, if you play Berserk for the ColecoVision, it runs really nice. A lot of testing went into that one, but
on that one, you simply use the sound chip to kind of mimic, because obviously Berserk has speech in it. You don't have speech in the game, but you use sound to try and mimic that, right?
Correct. And you've only got the inbuilt sound chip in the Coleco has very limited. So to play sound, you need to do volume modulation is the best way to get sound. So you vary the volume rapidly. And there's two ways you can do it in game. You can stop doing anything else, and the Z80 will probably play a fairly good speech recognition, but everything will stop.
That like the 5200 version of Berserk. That's exactly what they did. The game would stop. It would play and then it would continue along.
Correct. Yes, and it would still be quite rough sound because you only have 0 to 7 are your volume settings. So there's only, if you think about the number of bits, if you know what I mean. So it's not enough bits, and you can't play them rapidly enough to simulate somebody talking.
Right.
But you can do it if you dedicate more.
5 bits, but sure.
Yes. So there's two different ways you can do it. You can do it that uses less CPU and as good as you can. So as an example, so Berserk on the Coleco for all things, there is speech there, but shall we say adult males at a certain age, and depending on what you listen to, can't hear it. But there is actually
hear it, but I was like, okay, whatever.
Now, would you have thought about, or did you think about possibly using, like the 7800 would use a secondary Poke chip, or NES used their other chips. Do you think about simply adding a chip for those effects, or just became to the point where you didn't think it'd be cost effective to do something along those lines?
Well, the trouble is those modules and somebody's developed another version of it like in the last couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, speech thing.
Yeah. He's been banned from certain forums for releasing that apparently, so he's been kicked. I don't know why. I'm not going to go into that.
Yeah, same here. I don't understand it, but okay.
I don't understand it. But anyway, unfortunately, the actual chip, the speech chip, they're $30.
Just for the chip,
right? Yes.
Is it because it's an old chip that's hard to come by at this point?
Yeah, it's an older chip that's hard to come by. So I don't know. I mean, something like the Atari Vox would be great. If there was an Atari Vox for the Coleco that you plugged in.
Well, the Atari Vox would use the same 9-pin connector. I assume you just need to have code to communicate to it.
Correct. That's it.
From what I understand,
so it would actually that would be the more practical. Yeah.
From what I understand, the ColecoVision cartridge doesn't have enough data lines to stitch in that speech on that same.
On the actual cartridge, yes.
Yeah, you need a somebody told me that, an engineer, I think, or you, Tony, I think, told me there's not enough data lines to feed through the ColecoVision through the cartridge port. There's not enough data lines to.
Yeah, because the Coleco has an expansion port and a cartridge port, very similar to the original SpectraVideo. It had a cartridge port and an expansion port. When the only real major change between the SpectraVideo and MSX was they merged the two. Just like the NES's cartridge port is also its expansion port, although it does have another expansion.
It does have one, yeah, on the bottom. So, it's theoretically possible to make a game cartridge almost like the VIC-20 that plugged into the expansion port, and you would not run into those limitations.
Correct.
See, people, I can learn.
But unfortunately, once again, it's large connector. It's it's the connector. It's the expense there.
Yeah, not enough data lines to feed everything.
Oh no, the expansion. Glenn's talking about you could actually plug into the expansion thing. So I believe once again, so somebody's designed a multi-slot expander for the expansion port with a through connector that works quite well. Once again, I think it was a bit disappointing. Only 2 people have bought them so far and everything like that. But they are expensive once again because they're only talking low quantities and things like that.
Tony, there's a question here I think it's up your alley. Jason was asking, how does the 2600 Berserk Enhanced allow for speech on the original hardware? The 2600 is way more primitive than anything else out there. How did they manage to pull it off?
The cartridge port exposes the bus as well, which is why.
I heard the same thing. Right. If you get a, the multi-cart for the Atari, you get the Encore. Whatever it's called, Harmony Encore.
Yeah,
it'll push those extra features from that cartridge onto the bus directly versus being like, in other words, that ironically the 2600 could put more crap on the cartridge than the Coleco.
So basically, it wasn't really a cartridge port per se. It was really an expansion port that they plug cartridges into. Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's got power and everything coming out of there. So what you've got in those cartridges is a little computer on a chip, it running in the cartridge separately. So all the cartridge code needs to do is talk to a port, right, which is just a spot in memory, and the computer in the chip picks up on that and sends the command to the voice module. Right. What's really interesting about that card is obviously Atari have a cost-effective voice chip. That's what I'd like to find out about, right? Instead of reusing these old voice chips.
Yeah.
So that's what people don't realize. The original Berserk game it's a multi-board. It's got 5 circuit boards in the ArchiVision. I know. I have one. It's over there. And it has a sound and voice board, and on that is a speech synthesis chip. And all the game does is say, play this effect, and it merges that with the sound output. So the CPU is not doing it, and the original hardware is not doing it. It is a actual voice chip.
I still remember walking into arcade the first time there was a Berserk there, and I'm walking past it, and it said coin detected in a pocket, and I'm like literally thinking, how is it?
How the hell does it know that?
How is it know I have a coin in my pocket? It was freaky. It was freaky. But, that was the thing that, again, a lot of people who were born after the original arcade renaissance, if you will, the magic of walking into one of those areas and seeing a brand new, never before seen design, nothing machine just sitting there. And you were just like, your eyes glazed over. You were like memorized. Like nothing's better than this till something better came out, obviously, after that.
Oh, the early arcades were a dream. I remember one of the ones that blew me away was Lunar Lander. In the proper console with the big lever and the huge bass speakers. So when you turned that thrust on, you felt that thrust.
You felt it. In fact, Numbskull, I think, just announced they're going to be building a lunar lander, Pong, and a couple other machines coming out in 2024. So lunar lander is, again, it's a simple game, but that throttle, like you said, that throttle and that bass was just because people play
That's
now.
What made it, yes.
People just play it with a button. It's not the same. You need that adjustable thrust vectoring. But in case you guys didn't know, Numbskull, just go over to numbskull.com and take a look. It's on their Facebook page, I think, as well. That lunar lander will be out in 2024. Now, we are running close to our time here. So, Tony, I'm going to give you a few more minutes here to kind of plug your book. Plug yourself, plug your book. You got a couple minutes, man.
Book, yeah.
Tell us about it.
Oh. Yeah, well, right. The book is designed for anybody to give it a go. Right. I teach everything that you need to know in the book to get you started. And there's lots of tools. I don't just plug my own tools. I'm not selling my tools. I'm only selling the book. And you can pretty much do it on every platform. Unfortunately, the internet is very focused on Windows. So a lot of the tools you will only find on Windows. But you can use Wine and other emulators on the other ones for the ones you're missing. So you can use it on your operating system of choice. The book's very cost effective. You can just buy the electronic version and read it online, or you could buy the combo and you'll get a physical book later. I am going to
love a physical book.
Yeah, I am going to really try, and it is like 22.5-hour flight and going to cost me a lot of money, go to the Game On Expo in March over in Arizona.
Nice.
And I will have Sydney Hunter and the Caverns of Death released a physical cartridge, and this book will be in physical book form by that stage. Whether I can get to any other places in the US, we shall see.
Well, if anyone does want the book, the link is in the description of the video. So you can go right into the description of the video. You can click on it and go right now. It's $25.99 right now. You can save $14, 35% off currently. So grab it while you can.
And the code that hopefully Glenn will put in the chat is for all of my retro friends. It is 35% off any Manning product. So you want any other books, you can get 35% off.
Throw it in chat.
I meant to do that before. Of course, working on sound problems. Give me a second. I'll pull it up.
You have to stay to the end of the video to get the code.
That's exactly it.
Well, I want to thank you, Tony, for coming out and, taking your Saturday morning to hang out with us, a Friday night for us. And I'm sure the book will be great. And we'll get you on again on your next book. Well, maybe before that. I don't know when your next book will be.
Maybe on Fixing Arcades.
Yeah, exactly. How to fix an arcade? You kick it a lot and you replace capacitors. That's basically what you got to do.
That's the life of an arcade repairer.
Code is just put in. Code is just put in right there. Boom.
Yeah, boom. Thanks.
So the code is yep. That's it. That's it.
Well, work on any Manning. So you can buy any Manning book. So
that's for the whole store, basically. So AU35CRULT. So go ahead and buy the book. You'll be making the next Mario. Well, maybe not.
I got to say
quickly, but hey, eventually,
Tony's been on before, and it was a joy having him on again. He's very personable. He's not like you and me, Stephen. He knows what he's talking about, and like ourselves.
We're jackasses.
We are. But I'm just impressed on the book. He gave me a preview copy a few days ago. I was kind of going through it a little bit, and it's an easy read. It's not like he's going about just zeros and ones, and he goes through step by step in the book, which is not easy to do. I don't want to say it's quite like NES for Dummies per se, but it is a good read. And if you guys are into retro machines and consoles, I think it's definitely a good read for anyone, to be quite honest. Even just want to kind of know about the insides of how these things work.
Yeah. Well, it tells you a lot about the actual hardware, right? So,
like, even if you make the game that came with it, or the demo tutorial, I guess we'll call it, that'll give you a base at the very least to get to another stage or whatever. Hey, who knows? Tony might write a more advanced book or something down the road.
Well, there is actually scope to write a more advanced topics one for the.
Oh, there you go. I killed the cat out of the bag. Sorry about that. Well, thank
Tony,
you again, sir.
Again, I know. Yeah, like you were saying, we appreciate you coming on. Super Game Room Dudes has already started, so make sure you guys head over to Super Game Room Dudes. I'm sure they're talking about something about Arcade 1-Up. Like, who cares? But if you want to care about it, go over there. But in any case, guys, we definitely appreciate you guys every week. Steven, what would you like to say to our fans out there?
Thank you for coming out. Be kind to your loved ones. You never know when tomorrow is not going to be promised. So game on and give everybody a big fat hug. So have yourselves a good weekend. I don't say it like Glenn much.
You
but
totally
hey,
butchered
whatever.
it, Tony. He butchered it.
Take us out, Tony.
He did a bit. He did a bit. But everybody, more retro the better. Right?
There you go.
I
That
like
should be
that.
the line.
More retro, the better.
Right? More retro
More
the
retro.
better. And I'm trying to make more people to make more retro.
Not more chicks, more gay. Not that. We don't do that here.
But in all seriousness, we thank all you guys for joining us tonight. Tony, again, we appreciate you spending your Saturday morning here with us today. Great topic. We're going to have you on yet again because I think we have a lot more stuff to talk to you about. But in the meantime, everyone, Super Game Room Dudes has started. I'm slurring my speech because I'm tired. I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning. And I want to say, tell your family and friends that you love them because tomorrow's never promised. But in between those times, go get a copy of Tony's book.
And game on.
Game on.
Game on. Sit, Blue, sit. Good dog.